See, there's something within us that wants to leave a legacy. But here's the thing you need to know is if God asks you to do something, don't look at the size of the job, look at the size of your God who asked you to do it. See, he laid down his life for you, so that tells me that you are not worthless, you are worthy. And this is what he wants to rewrite into your story. That reality impacts everything. Welcome everyone to week 3 of Master Your Money. So glad to have you guys joining us, and to have gone through this series in a small group is so important because we're processing really one of the most important kind of subjects in our lives, which is our money. But to do this with other people that you trust and that you can kind of rub off of one another in terms of like your ideas is such a huge thing. So this week 3, we talked about your habits, money in your habits. Week 1 was money in your heart. Week 2, money in your faith or what you trust. Week 3, money in your habits. Because a lot of us, we look at this subject of money and we'd say, I want my money to reflect my heart, my love for God. I want it to reflect my faith in God and that I trust him more than the mighty dollar. But at the end of the day, the dollars don't add up. The math doesn't add up. And I would argue that part of our problem could be that our habits just aren't aligning right now, that you don't actually have some good, healthy money habits in your life. And so today, in this past weekend, what we talked about was just some super practical, biblical habits that if you apply them, they will actually set you up to master your money versus your money mastering you. So this week, super excited. I've got my awesome wife here with me, and she and I are just going to talk about actually these habits, how we've kind of taken a deep dive into every single one of them, what we've learned, what we've done well as what we haven't done well. And hopefully we'll just be able to live a little bit of our life in front of you guys and in the group here. And then we will hopefully be able to set all of us in this conversation up for what does this look like now for each one of you. So first one, I'm just going to go right through these and then we're going to talk about these, okay? First habit was this: spend less than you earn. And I know while that sounds like super simplistic, okay, stop the spending, it's amazing. And this is something I mentioned this weekend. Almost every person, when they get in a financial crisis or a situation, almost everybody says, how can I make more? How can I earn more income? No one, I'm telling you, no one goes, how can we spend less? No one's doing that. No one asks that. It's always, all right, what do I have to do to scramble to make more money? Where I would argue we need to approach it differently and ask, how can we spend less? How can we spend less than what we earn? Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 10, it says this: whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. See, we will always say, my income's not enough. And I would argue that it's actually reflecting that our heart is in love with our stuff. We're suffering from stuffication. And we are right now, we're looking at our money through this lens of how do I get more of it so that I can get more stuff, as opposed to how do I cut it out of my life. And so, Lisa, let's talk a little bit about this. Here's a couple questions I wrote down. How did we cut our spending to bare minimum back in the day, as well as even what are some of the practices we use today? I threw another one. Maybe you guys will get into this in your small groups. Is how do you address contentment in your life? But let's talk about how do we cut down to bare minimum.
So we had a time in our life in Minnesota when we were at a church where we had to really scale back, cut back, and I had to be content with generic food. I shopped.
That was a really hard one for you.
It was hard. I think I grew up in a poor home, and so having name brand things meant something.
Yeah.
It meant that we were okay. We were doing life like adults. So we went back to generic.
I gotta cut her off real quick. She cried one time. The first time we bought generic, she came home in tears. I was like, what's wrong? She's like, we have to buy generic.
True
but
story.
That was part of our process. All right, continue on. What were some of the other things?
Yeah, so we also cut out soda. Apparently you don't need soda. So we stopped buying it, and that saved us quite a bit of money. We also did things like babysitting co-op. So we would exchange with other families who had kids. They'd come over and watch our kids, so we could go out and we'd do the same for them, so they could go out and have a free date if they needed to. We did food co-op where 2 times, 3 times a week, a family would bring us a meal. 1 time a week, I would bring their families a meal. And that really saved time and energy, but also I wasn't grocery shopping as much as I used to, and buying all those things that you buy right at the cash register on the way out. So those are some of the things we did just to cut back and be content with less.
Yeah. I mean, we had to, though, just look at everything from very honest needs versus wants. I use this in my message this weekend, talking about how our kids, they misuse that need phrase a lot. They'll say things like, I need a cell phone. I need the new video game system. I need whatever. And my favorite is our daughter, who's like, I need a pony. And
you really don't.
No, you don't. And
nobody has room for a pony.
That's right. But we don't need those things. And just helping us really wrestle through our children, and then for us as adults, I mean, we got to get honest. Yeah. Are we talking about needs, or are we talking about wants? And a lot of those wants have shifted into the need category, where they just don't need to be. It's not true. Yeah. And when you can separate those things, then you can start eliminating those things and go, okay, this is what we need versus this is what we want. This is what we can actually live on. Then we can cut. Yep. So, and that will get you to this place where you're actually spending less than you earn. Second biblical principle here is avoid the use of debt. Avoid the use of debt. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7 says this: the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. You'll never feel more enslaved than to the mighty monthly bill that is due every single month. And so a simple question for us to just kind of share a little bit is, what have been our practices around debt? And so I'll actually start. Lisa and I have been really lucky to have gotten on top of this from the very beginning. We've never had any credit card debt or any student loan. We fought really hard for both of us to not have any student loan debt. And so with that, we also then fought to never add any to our life. But we made a pretty foolish financial choice when we were first married, where we bought a timeshare together. We were married and we got talked into it. And not that all timeshares are bad or wrong, because I know there's some of you who might own them and it works perfect for you. For us, vacationing, we came to find out every one of our vacations ends up being with our families. And so an extra vacation to go to timeshares just never even aligned with the number of weeks that we had available, and we just couldn't ever pull it off. So it didn't even make sense for us. But then there were fees and there was all this. And so I remember going to my dad and going, Dad, we're in this. Yeah. And there's the monthly bill, there's maintenance fees and all that goes with this. How do I get out of this debt? And my dad started telling me, like, there are the biblical and legal way to get out of your debt is debt forgiveness. So I wrote all the companies, like the president, the vice president's assistant. I mean, I wrote everyone basically saying, hey, we're a struggling poor family with twins, and we just need out of this debt. And they did. They just eliminated it. So obviously we lost everything we put into it, but the debt was gone. And and then we've just made the commitment not to add any debt outside of a mortgage in our lives all the way. And so share a little bit about even something you ran into even this week. So
yeah, I was talking with another mom actually last night, and we were talking about college, and she was asking about the twins, where they're going to go, what they're going to do. And we got talking about college debt. And she had made the comment, they're trying to bargain shop almost for schools, get the lowest amount. But then her last phrase was, it's what all kids are doing nowadays. It's going to be fine. And in my heart, I was like
acquiring all this debt.
Yes. That everybody's exiting college with massive amounts of debt. And my heart was like, no, that doesn't have to be. We came out without debt, but it's almost that changing your contentment with your education. And then I told her, I was like, I don't know what the stats are, but the number of adults I talk with that are not using their degree at all is staggering. So they're paying off into their 30s and 40s school debt
and
they're
50s.
that they're not even using. And I'm like, that's insanity. I think that's insanity. So I held my tongue and just smiled and went, wow, okay.
So you didn't correct her?
I didn't. She's a sweet Christian sister, but I thought, I don't want to embrace the idea. I want to help. I want to set my kids up in their 30s to be successful. I don't want them to enter marriage with so much debt that then their husband, their wife also gets this debt. And if we know that finances are a huge cause of a divorce, then I'm not going to tell my kid that's okay. Let's just rack it up. It's going to be fine.
Yeah. So, I mean, just something to process is, even as Dave Ramsey would say, if you're in debt, you build a plan that sprints your way out of debt. I mean, not just like lackadaisically, we're going to slowly work at it, but we are going to aggressively go after this because you want to avoid the use of debt completely if at all possible. Third, biblical principle here is build margin, or another way of saying it is save. It's time to save some money. Proverbs 21:20 says this: the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. They're not saving, they just get rid of it. And so for us, let me talk even about how we started saving. So way back, even when we were dirt poor, had no money, we made a commitment. Lots of kids, mortgage, all those good things. We made a commitment that we were going to save something. And so it began for us as doing the automatic transfer from our checking into our savings. And it started at $50 a month. That was it. It was this deal of going, if we don't do anything, we are setting ourselves up for just a failure here. But if we just at least do this, we will have saved $600 this year.
Which was a big deal.
It was a huge deal. Huge deal. Well, because even if you have, Dave Ramsey calls it the $1,000 emergency fund. You save for that rainy day because you don't plan for those things. But if you have, all right, the brakes go out and they need to be fixed, $600 is going to cover that. And so just saving something is so huge. So that would be our encouragement. Start with something, even if it's small. Fourth biblical principle is set long-term goals. Proverbs 13:16 says, a wise man thinks ahead. A fool doesn't, even brags about it. And then Proverbs 6, kind of 6 through 8, it says, go to the ant, you sluggard, or another way of saying that is you lazy one. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer, no ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. And the whole point is an ant with very small brain actually stores and has a long-term plan for this next season that it will face. And for us, who are much smarter than an ant, do we have a long-term goal for the next season that you are going to face financially? And so I know this is totally in Lisa's wheelhouse, right?
No.
I love this because it's so opposite of her. You just got to share.
So, funny story. The same time when we were in Minnesota, we decided we needed a financial planner, maybe because the $50 a month. I don't know.
Brilliant.
So we had gone into the planner, and the first thing you do is you kind of walk through where you're at, and then we got to the goal setting page. And my Montana does not come out very often, but my Montana comes out pretty big time in this area. So in Montana, death happens all the time. It's the terrain, it's the roads. I've been to more funerals as a child, probably 5 times as many as I have as an adult. So there's this motto in Montana where it's live for today, seize the day, go big or go home. Everything is all about today because tomorrow's not guaranteed. And so I was raised in this, and so our sweet financial planner looked at me and said, Lisa, do you have any long-term goals? What are your long-term goals? And I thought for a minute, and I said, well, I'd really love to have shelter for myself and my family, and probably food for all of us would be really great, and probably some clothes. I probably need to have clothes for my kids. And he stopped and looked at me and goes, those are not long-term goals. Those are daily needs. And I was like, oh, okay. So then he just kind of pressed in and started probing deeper. He said, what about traveling? Would you like to travel when you get older? And I said, well, I've been to Israel. I've been to the British Isles. I've been to Hawaii. I've been to the Bahamas. I've traveled the U.S. I feel like I'm pretty good. And he was starting to get exasperated, I could tell. And then he was like, okay, well, what about family vacations? Can you think just that little bit out? And I said, well, we always go with Josh's family and they have a boat and it's fun and I'm good with that. That's great and it's pretty free. And so he tried one more time. He's like, all right, now what about your children's education? Don't you want to be able to give to your kids for their education? I said, my parents didn't give to me. I worked since I was in 6th grade and I worked my butt off and I paid for my whole college and I'm proud of that. And I said, what's more, I didn't screw around in college. I did school, then I went to work and worked my butt off, and then I did homework. I didn't have time to sow wild oats. I didn't have time to get into bad things. And I want to give my kids the same gift, focused energy. So he finally just let out this huge sigh and then turned to Josh and goes, Josh, do you have any long-term goals? And Josh did, thankfully. And I get a little bit of that.
Barely. I mean, I think I followed it up with
all he had to say was, do you ever want a boat? And Josh was like, yes, I do.
Yeah,
that one.
Yeah, that was
down.
it. Yeah, write down that. But yeah, this has been one that we've actually even struggled at, but we have become more and more purposeful to say, all right, what are some of those things that are in the season ahead that we need to get long-term planning around? And one of the things I just shared this weekend even is like staring down the fact that we do have 2 kids going off to college, and we're not going to pay for their college, but we do want to be able to help all of our children. And we've kind of figured out like, here's the dollar amount per year per child that we want to be able to support them. And so even this past year, I love it because she didn't even know I was doing it. But
he's a planner and I'm not.
Yeah, I just started putting a certain amount of money every single week over into our savings, knowing that, all right, if we save this, that will have knocked this past year, that will knock off one of the kids, because we got 2 going off to college, that of our commitment for this coming year. And so knowing that, I just kind of was keeping that in mind going, in the fall, we're going to have to kind of up that exercise or that habit, but we've already established it with that long-term goal in mind. So you do have to set some long-term goals and go, what can we do today to set ourselves up for that later? Final one is give. This is that biblical habit that obviously it demonstrates your heart, it demonstrates your faith. And 2 Corinthians 9:6, it says this, whoever sows sparingly will reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will reap generously. Each of you should give what you've decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And I know there's so many, I think almost every Christian I know, they actually desire to give more. Yeah. I don't think I've ever met a Christian who's going, you know what, I'm actually content with where I'm at. I think everyone wants to up their game and grow in that and become even better at that. And so you've got to start somewhere. I walked us through kind of what I consider to be the generosity journey that most people will take. So these 5 steps along the way. An initial giver, that's giving for the first time, not just to a good organization that might provide, food for the poor or water for, the thirsty, digging wells, but trusting the Lord with a gift to the Lord specifically. An initial giver. The second is an intentional giver. This is a percentage giver. They're going, I'm going to give consistently. I'm going to give a percentage. I'm going to give the first of what I make to the Lord. And then that third step is a tithe giver. That's like, I'm going to fulfill that commitment as a consistent, once again, percentage giver, but at a tithe level. Fourth step, a generous giver. A generous giver is someone who's now looking for additional ways to give offerings to the Lord. That could be through mission support or other good Christian organizations that are making huge difference, whether it's things like Save Families or other missionaries who support that type of thing. And then the final one is an extravagant giver. And the extravagant giver is the one that when the Lord asks you to give something huge, and quite frankly, let me finish the statement. When the Lord asks you to give something huge, you step into that and you step up for it. But I said this past weekend, your income does not impact whether you can go through this process and become an extravagant giver. Yeah. The widow who gave the widow's mite was an extravagant giver. So it's not about income, it's about walking the journey. And So what are some of the ways, question for us, that we've actually practiced generous giving or extravagant giving, even when we were making a ton less?
Mm-hmm.
So at least share one story here.
Yeah, I'll share a story. We were part of a great church down in Illinois, and we loved it, and we believed in what they were doing and the impact they were making. And they were building a huge building, and we knew that, hey, we're called to be on the front lines here and to give. And so we both prayed, Lord, what do you want us to give? And the number came back from the Lord, too big.
It was an extravagant gift.
Yeah. Like impossible. Like I would have said it's impossible. And we both prayed separately, and the Lord gave us both the same number, which is scary, because then you're like, oh, he means it. And now we have to follow up on it. So we were like, all right, Lord, if that's what you want. And we got a game plan of how we dumpster dived and refinished furniture to sell it, to just pay down this big number he gave us. Little did we know, within a few months, he would have us sell our house and we'd be moving to Minnesota. And so we were able then to, upon the sale of our house, take some of that profit from the sale and write this check to the church. And I remember the pastor's wife saying, listen, you're leaving. You don't have to fulfill your commitment. Don't worry about it. It's huge. You could use the money in your move. But we had talked about it, and the Lord asked us to. So that was
it was like one
even
of these
a great advice from a pastor's
the
wife.
pastor, and the senior pastor called me personally. He's like, don't give it. And we're like, and both of us looked at one another and we're like,
we made a commitment to the Lord.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with you guys. This has everything to do with what he's called us to do.
Yeah. So now fast forward, we're in Minnesota years later, and Errol was just born, and we were financially struggling. Really struggling.
Yeah.
And we had just gotten the bill in the mail for the cost of his birth. Yeah. And I had no idea how we were going to do it. No idea how we were going to pay that. And so I had a moment with the Lord, kind of the shaking the fist moment, and I said, Lord, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're thinking. We can't afford this. And then I remembered this big gift we gave to Manuka. And I said, Lord, if we had that money back, we could pay this bill multiple times over. Where are your blessings? I believed if I gave in faith, you would pour out blessings from heaven on me. That's what your word says. I'm holding you to it. Where's your blessing? And the Lord spoke. It's one of those moments that you never forget. He was so close, and he whispered to my heart, my blessing is Errol, my child. That was the gift. That was the return from this great gift. And I realized in that moment, of course, something eternal is the Lord's blessing and the Lord's gift to me. In that moment, he was telling my heart, Lisa, if I give you a child as a gift, don't worry about this bill. Money is nothing to me. And sure enough, later in the mail, we got an anonymous cash envelope. And the Lord just provided, and we were able to pay it. It was just a sweet time, a hard time, but where the extravagant gift and the faith, and then the Lord's promise was not what I expected, that it was going to be a child, but it was. Yeah.
So I don't know where you find yourself kind of on that giving journey. Maybe you even want to share that in your small group today, going, well, I haven't taken that first step, or we have made it to the intentional, or if you've ever done an extravagant gift that you felt called to. Maybe you want to share that story and how the Lord used that and showed up in your life, because some of those stories are just the most encouraging stories that help propel our faith forward. So enjoy your conversations. Thanks so much for joining us during this whole series, Master Your Money. We just do pray God's blessing on you as you really walk with him in this journey. See you guys next week.